make sure to follow us on Instagram at Whistlethrowers. It's a great way to interact with our show. Our DMs are always open for questions, topic discussions, and more. You will be able to find our new episodes and other announcements there.
Welcome back to the Whistlethrowers podcast. This is your host, Jack Mubarak, joined by
Aiden Tiksinski
And Jack Slaymaker.
We're all back from vacation, but Aiden's leaving us in a week to go to school.
I know I am, unfortunately.
We're going to make it work, though. So let's jump right in. This is a win for America. We don't have to hear about Kevin Durant and his antics for this foreseeable future. I hope. I wouldn't be surprised if something changed, but for the meantime, he's a net. Thoughts?
Yeah, so it's kind of weird how this all happened, just because this extension for his 4-year, $198 million contract just jumped in this season. So the fact he was already asking to get traded, like I said, it just felt very strange to me. I understand what he was saying, not wanting to play with Ben Simmons, considering everything that seemed to have happened right before Game 4, where they all the Nets players were in a group chat, asked Ben if he was going to play Game 4. Ben basically left the group just from the rumors and reports that came out. The fact Kyrie only played 29 games last season, all on the road. It just felt like that there was a lot of drama that KD was not prepared for when he asked to play with Brooklyn, when he wanted to join Kyrie and James Harden, make a super team. So I feel like that all of that coinciding with each other, it made, like I said, it makes sense, but it also just felt like a lot of unneeded drama that Brooklyn didn't have to go through, considering all the other drama that they've already gone through in the last season.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It was just an awkward situation in general with everything that happened. Like you said, you didn't even get to the Kyrie and the vaccine part, which obviously took place way before everything that's happening now, really. But I saw the writing on the wall for this. I think a lot of people did too, with just that Kevin Durant was not going to be able to get traded, because once the reports come out of what Marks was asking for, and he was being smart about it, honestly, because I think Jack said an episode or two ago that nothing the Nets would get in a KD trade would be worth Kevin Durant. And I completely agree with that. No matter what kind of draft picks you get, and obviously there's no player really in the league that is Kevin Durant. Even now, he's old and a little bit injury prone. He's dealt with some bad injuries the last couple of years, but he's still Kevin Durant. He's still a top 5 player without question. So I think Jack was right in saying that there was no return that would benefit the Nets in that situation, I think. So Marks handled it well. And once those reports were coming out, you knew that they weren't going to be able to get a deal done with anyone. And Durant was going to have to count his losses, and then he's going to have to play the season with them, unfortunately. And I don't see it going well, to be honest. I really don't see it going well.
I think, we talked about this in the first episode, that there wasn't many teams that could make the trade, like you brought up, Jack. There's just not any teams that has the draft capital or the young players to make a trade for a guy this talented. You touched that you don't think it's going to go that well with him coming back. I kind of disagree. If and only if every single player of that big three that the Nets have now created, their new big three, I guess, plays consistent time. I mean, Kyrie, yes, I touched on it. He only played 20 minutes. Yes, he didn't get the vaccine. But the thing is, he's still one of the best ball handlers in basketball history, and that can't really be disputed. The other thing that can't be disputed is what he did for the Nets when he played 27.4 points per game, 4.4 rebounds per game, and 5.8 assists per game. That is such a huge added bonus to the Nets, and it was a huge bonus to the fact that they were pretty much struggling all the way through the season. And yeah, they didn't win a lot of games when Kyrie came back, but that's also because they just didn't flow well, because all those games were on the road. For whatever reason, it obviously didn't work winning-wise, but they looked like a better team. And for all the problems that we have with Ben Simmons, he's still one of the best defenders in basketball. So even though he's not going to score a whole lot, because he just hasn't scored a whole lot on his career, and I don't see that changing anytime soon, you can get a steal from Ben. He can pass it to Kyrie. Kyrie can either make his own shot with his dribbling skills or pass it to Durant, and Durant can score. I don't see how this team can be stopped if they all play consistently. Now, that's a huge if, because obviously Ben Simmons has not played at all in the last season. Kyrie, even before the vaccine thing, and I touched on this in the first episode, left the Celtics under weird circumstances where he basically didn't tell the team he was leaving, did a similar thing with the Nets where he would skip games and not say where he was going. And that could be a huge factor as well this season. We don't know what Kyrie could do in the middle of the season. We don't know if Ben Simmons will be happy playing Durant considering all this drama that's happening off season. But if they all play together, I don't see a reason why this team can't make it at a minimum to the Eastern Conference Finals. Their goals at this point should be the finals.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think Kevin Durant realized as a business decision he's not going to go anywhere and they're going to be a title contender because they're going to have to gut every team he goes to, bar the Warriors, but they're not going to trade him.
Yeah, you're right.
And he's not in a great situation, but they can definitely make a hell of a lot out of it, which is what you were touching on. And yeah, there's a lot of egos on that team, but Ben and Kyrie are really great players on paper, especially Kyrie. In my opinion, he's the second most entertaining athlete I've ever seen.
Not even
in
on
my
paper,
life.
just his ball handling. Like I said, it's just amazing to watch him. I mean, there's really no one that can do what he did ever in NBA history just because, you have guys that can have more assists, obviously John Stockton, Jason Kidd to that level, but they weren't able to make their own shots or create assists the way that Kyrie can.
Yeah, no, you're right. Definitely. And I think that it looks really good on paper, everything you're saying. You're right, there's a huge appeal to it, but it's all paper. And, I just think when the season happens and, all their personalities is Durant and Kyrie have only been able to win when they were surrounded with true professionals. I'm not sure if we touched on this in previous episodes, but Durant was the best player on the Warriors teams that he won titles on. He was the best basketball player. But we know that was Steph Curry's team. He was the unquestioned leader of that team. And there's a reason for that, because he's a true professional, because he has a level head. He's able to work with all his teammates. And not saying that Kevin Durant can't do that, but it is in question because he hasn't done it. There have been times when he was clashing with teammates and things of that nature. Like in OKC when he was winning an MVP, there were players who were kind of on the bottom who said that they didn't really know Durant. That's not a great sign of a leader, That's not something Curry does. And then you look at Kyrie, he won with probably the truest professional of all time, LeBron James. LeBron James, no matter what you think of him off the court or on the court, you can't deny his stout leadership. I mean, it is unquestionably exquisite. No player, no athlete in any sport has really the leadership qualities that LeBron James does. And there's a small list of names that are added to that. Michael Jordan, Tom Brady, Wayne Gretzky. That list is very, very short.
I don't think LeBron's ever made a bad decision in his whole career. On the field, off the field.
I'm low-key thinking the Lakers was a bad decision, but I mean, he did get a ring.
So here's the thing. He got a ring. Most of his goals are for Hollywood. He got a movie out of it. And you could say that the movie might have not been great, but he still made millions of dollars off of it.
And now he's a billionaire.
Right, exactly. He got all the financial goals. He gets to live in Los Angeles.
Yep.
I'm sorry, I don't really think that, it might not be great maybe because now the Lakers, I think it was a bad decision on the Lakers' part because they totally tanked their organization trying to win that ring.
Yeah.
But for LeBron's sake, he got another ring. I don't think it was, it was bad for Lakers, not bad for LeBron.
Okay, I can agree with that. And actually, I think the worst move, though, was trading for Anthony Davis, looking back on it, because that team that they had, the core that they traded, was actually, pretty good. And honestly, if you add those players back and take away Anthony Davis, Ingram, Lonzo Ball, Josh Hart, was there another one that did Kuzma go in that?
No, Kuzma.
That was a separate one, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But the Lakers...
that was another... We're going to trade Kuzma, a younger guy, for a more veteran experience.
Yeah. Oh, they traded him for Westbrook.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, all right. So two terrible trades that they made for just big names that can't stay on the court. One can't stand on the court, and the one can stay on the court, but you just want to get them off the court.
Yeah. This is what the Lakers do. They just get rid of young guys. And
it was just, that's not a smart decision, honestly. So, I think that they gambled.
Jack, I want to go back to a point that you made where there was a lot of guys in OKC saying they didn't really know Durant and all that.
Yeah.
So Harden was one of those guys, and then he went to Brooklyn. Do you think that, first, this is a two-part question. Do you think the main reason he went there was because of Kyrie or Durant? And do you think he left because he felt like Durant wasn't being a professional?
Well, nah, I don't think he left. I'll answer the second one first. I don't think he left OKC because of Durant. Durant and Harden have always been friends.
Well, no, I'm saying when they were on the Nets, do you think...
Okay. I thought you were talking about... Okay,
No.
All right. So then I'll answer your first question. What was it again?
Yeah, it was... Yeah, do you think that when Harden went to the Nets, do you think it was because of Kyrie or because of Durant?
I think it was definitely a mixture of both, but more Kyrie, I think. Because I think they were closer, to be honest. And, like, we've seen this with Durant. Like, he's so kept in and, like, secretive, and he's hard to, like, get close with, I feel like, unless you were close with him from childhood, because he's brought up a lot of his childhood friends who like live with him and stuff now. So with Harden, I feel like it's like closer to get with KD than it was with Kyrie. So I think he went to the Nets more because of Kyrie, to be honest.
Yeah.
And then when he left the Nets, I don't think so. Like, I think that the popular opinion is Kyrie versus KD, versus which is why he left. Because people said that Kyrie and Harden used to fight at practice.
Yeah.
Which I think they were just being competitors. That tells
right. Yeah. I think the practicing could be, sorry not to cut you off, but I think that practicing can be a little bit overplayed. Look, Jordan got
100%.
in multiple fights.
Yeah. No, and
if
you've ever played on a basketball team, like you practice and you go really hard and you end up like just clashing with a teammate.
Right. And that doesn't necessarily mean that can make you a better basketball player.
Yeah. So we're fighting for the exact same positions.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And they're just pushing each other. At the end of the day, they want to push each other. So I think that stuff got overblown. And then again with KD, I think that they were just, both of them were frustrated. And they were probably just, like, that made them clash a little bit, I think. I don't think it was relationship ruining necessarily like it was made out to be. But I think the main reason Harden left was because of the front office disconnect. Like, when KD told, I think his name's Joe Tsai, the Nets owner, when he told him, you got to choose between me and Nash and Marks, that told me that Harden left for that reason, I think. Like, I think that there was just a major disconnect there. And that's the thing with championship teams, people don't realize this. It's not just about what's on the court and the coaches, it's like the front office plays a huge role, and not just adding players and coaches, like forming a relationship with those players and coaches, like creating a good environment in your organization. That's a huge part of a championship. And we have seen like championship teams have clashed with their front office. Like Jordan always was butting heads with, I don't remember his name. Yeah, Jerry Krause. And so we've seen championship teams do it, but we've also seen championship teams like the Warriors where they're pretty much a family, where Jerry West, Steve Kerr, Steph Curry, all the players down, that's a family organization. That's like a very good championship formula.
I actually wanted to touch on Last Dance because of the fact that it was one of the first documentaries I've seen that touched on that player versus the front office. I would say the major difference, this is something I didn't think of till right now, but the major difference between the Nets and that Bulls team was the fact that Phil Jackson was 100% for the players, and Steve Nash is basically being protected by the Nets front office. So the players don't seem to like Nash as a coach.
Yeah.
And that, I feel like that could potentially lead to problems. But at the end of the day, if you're going to win, you got to keep your superstars happy.
Yeah, right.
So there is a chance that if things go a little bit off-road, I could see Nash getting fired some point in the middle of the season.
I can definitely
he's on thin
agree with
ice.
that.
He's just not a good coach, straight up.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to touch on one thing. This is going to be a really hot take, but let me finish. I don't think that Kevin Durant, like through his career, has really been that great of a leader. And let me finish. I feel like he's taken a lot of back seats, especially with this whole Nets ordeal. Like when he should have gotten involved, like maybe should have been more communicative with like Kyrie Irving and James Harden instead of like, I don't want to feed into the narrative that he like takes the easy way out, but like when the Nets situation was in hot water in June, he requested a trade instead of trying to fix it. So I think a lot of like the Nets problems are rooted behind Kevin Durant, and people don't want to look at that, but the organization has done absolutely everything they asked of him.
Yeah.
and they have nothing to show for it.
Yeah, right.
Well, I think that's the thing that people forget. Yeah, Durant's now asking for Nash to be fired, but all those guys wanted Nash to be hired in the first place.
So they could do whatever they wanted.
Exactly. They wanted a guy who was a superstar, who knew what it was like to be a superstar in the NBA, so they would allow his superstars to just be themselves. And now Durant's unhappy with that because they didn't win. The whole situation just feels weird. Thankfully, for his sake, for the Nets' sake, he's still on the Nets. We'll see how long that they're out of the media reports, because I feel like it's just going to be a couple of weeks till a new story comes out.
Right, that's how it works in the NBA.
Yeah.
All right, before we move into football, does Donovan Mitchell getting traded to the Knicks make any sense to you guys?
Obviously it depends on the package and everything, but I think it makes a lot of sense for the Jazz to move on from Mitchell right now. So I don't blame them at all for wanting to ship Mitchell, even though I love Mitchell. I think he's a great player, even though he's a New York Met fan. I still love Donovan Mitchell. I think New York is in a tough spot right now because they are so depleted of talent. The roster has nothing on it. So I think that adding Mitchell and maybe, I don't think that they're going to be super upset with parting with some of their players and even some of their younger guys. Obviously, you're not trading Barrett. But if you have to give up Randall, I don't really think that they're going to be too hard-pressed not to do that, So I think adding Mitchell does make sense for them because you need something to build around. Even though being in the basement is good, they aren't in the basement. They're the notch above
they were the 11th
basement.
seed last year, which now in the expanded playoffs could get you into the play-in.
Right, yeah. So it's they are in such a bad spot where they're not in the top 5 picks, but they're also not in the top 5 teams. So they're in such a bad spot. They need to get something to build around. And Mitchell led the Jazz to the 1 seed just 2 years ago. He's something. You can really get something there if you put the right pieces around. Mitchell, what's his first name?
Robinson.
Yeah, Mitchell Robinson. I think that's a good piece for Donovan Mitchell because he's what Gobert was missing on offense. I don't think Gobert was a good enough lob threat off the pick and roll for Mitchell. He was a good standstill, catch and jump for it. But when Gobert would come off the pick and roll, he wasn't great with the lobs. But that's what Robinson's specialty is. He's so good at, you just lob it up to him and he's going to go up. He's so athletic. He jumps out of the gym. He has a 7'6" wingspan. So that's a great player for Mitchell. So I think that if they add Mitchell, that might be a good pairing. And then they have Barrett too on the outside. So
did you see what they offered today?
No, I didn't see. What was it?
It was Obi Toppin, Evan Fournier, and it was 5 picks, and 2 of them were unprotected.
Oh, man.
And the Jazz were mad because they wanted 4 picks unprotected of the 5.
Interesting.
Jeez.
I mean, I'm not surprised to see Obi Toppin's name brought up.
Yeah, not at all.
He's such an athletic player, but he just hasn't really gotten the time to be able to expand himself with the Nets, the Knicks.
Yeah.
And the Knicks haven't really given him a chance to show what he did in college at Dayton, where he was he was a Skywalker.
Yeah,
every dunk he had was amazing.
Yeah.
I will say, looking at 2 things about this that are interesting. First of all, it's weird for the Jazz to trade Rudy Gobert, who's one of their 2 best players, Mitchell obviously being first, Gobert being second, and then keeping Mitchell. Because it feels like they're trying to go into rebuild, but keeping Mitchell would make absolutely no sense.
Yeah.
If you're trying to rebuild and keep your best player, I just don't see that.
Yeah, because he's going to win you some games.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're trying to tank and you have one of the best players in the NBA on your team, you're going to be a middle-of-the-road team because there's so many teams that are worse than you if you still have Donovan Mitchell on your team.
Yeah.
The other thing that I looked at, like Jackie brought up, that the Knicks were the 11th seed last year. They're the 4th seed 2 years ago. So they really are that middle-of-the-road team, especially because the backdrop of the East isn't great. The Magic still are the Magic.
Yeah.
I don't have a lot of faith in the Pistons right now still. So they really have a decent shot at getting into that, at least the 10th seed, if not a little bit higher.
Yeah.
But just looking at some of their guards, Fournier, I'm not surprised he was brought up, averaged 14.1 points per game. It's good, but Donovan Mitchell's averaging 25. Yeah. He's got a lot of assists as well. So I just think that he would bring so much to that guard position. I am interested to hear that they didn't mention Jalen Brunson in that trade. I know they just traded for him, but he is their best point guard already.
Yeah.
So I'm not terribly sure why the Jazz wouldn't want a guy who's that good at Dallas, who's still pretty young, who could be a future building block for a franchise team.
Yeah.
So Fournier and Obi Toppin and 5 picks, like that's fine, but I would want Brunson if I'm a front office guy. But maybe the Knicks just decided, hey, we just traded for him this offseason. Yeah. We want to at least see what he can do with this team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The assistant coach vetoed that trade if they offered Brunson.
Yeah. Yeah.
For sure.
But when I'm looking at this, I'm just assuming, like, playing along that this trade went through, they got 3 or 4 unprotected picks instead. That team is probably the most 43-39 team I've ever laid my eyes on. Like, I do not see them doing anything in the East.
No.
That would be Brunson at the 1, Mitchell at the 2, Barrett at the 3, Randall at the 4, and Robinson at the 5, I guess.
Yeah.
And that's not going to win you anything in the East. At all.
I mean, they're just not a deep team. The other thing that the biggest reason why the Knicks were the 4 seed 2 years ago is because of the fact that guys were having career seasons with that team.
Yeah.
Like, that's just not going to happen. You're already seeing with Julius Randle is not the same player he was even 2 years ago from last year. Like, there was just a huge drop off.
Yeah.
And I think just looking at his career numbers, Randall's the type of guy he was last year and not the guy he was 2 years ago.
I agree. I completely agree.
You think they're just going to take turns going off one year?
I mean, maybe, but maybe RJ Barrett develops into the player that everyone thought he was going to be coming out of Duke. I don't know. I just don't see that either.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he has that 1 year that's just great, but like you just said, Jack, 1 great year and having all those guys is not going to get you enough to get out of the East.
No, they're not even better than the Sixers, and I criminally overhate the Sixers. Let's transfer in the NFL. This is the hottest story right now. Mayfield is named the starter.
Don't say that. Oh my gosh.
Thoughts?
If that is the hottest story in the NFL right now, it is a slow off season. I mean, what can I say? Like I said in the last episode, whoever started for them is going to lead them to no more than 4 wins, probably. It's just a bad roster.
Is that predicting that McCaffrey's going to miss a lot of time?
No, honestly, I don't think that McCaffrey would change much because we've seen with guys like Saquon Barkley. Saquon's an amazing talent, obviously. Super strength, great speed, elusive, agile. Those are all things you can say about McCaffrey too. And you saw what Saquon has done with the Giants. He can't do anything because he can't run anywhere. You can't run when you're getting hit as soon as the ball's handed into your hands. So I feel like that's coming with McCaffrey.
Yeah, no, for sure. And the other thing, too, I just pulled up Baker's stats quickly from last year. Yeah, he was injured. 17 touchdowns, 13 interceptions, 3,000 passing yards. He was great in 2020 as well. But I think that he was beat up with an offensive line that was better than what the Panthers have now.
Yeah.
So you not only have to worry about Christian McCaffrey staying healthy, and yeah, Christian McCaffrey, I would say, are right up there with Saquon, if not better, more athletically.
Yeah.
And you said that even with him staying healthy, which there just isn't a good history of that happening, but you not only have to keep your best player on the field healthy, you also have to keep your quarterback healthy.
Yeah.
And if you can't do either of those things, and yes, Sam Darnold, I would say, is a serviceable backup.
Yeah.
He wasn't as bad as people think he was when he played for the Jets.
No, I agree.
Jets team was also just terrible as well.
It's pretty ironic that you say that he's a serviceable backup. I completely agree. He's actually probably a top 10, top 5 backup, to be honest. I mean, he was the 3rd overall pick, and he's not, like you said, he's not starter good necessarily, but he's serviceable at backup. You know, if your QB gets hurt, he can play a couple games for you.
Right, if I'm the Panthers quarterback room and I'm their QB coach, I'm actually not too worried about it if Baker goes down.
Yeah, which he probably will.
Right, and the whole thing is that, as a Panthers coach right now, your team has, basically no chance of making the playoffs, much less winning the NFC South.
Yeah.
So, as long as you make it through the season and win 5 to 6 games, I would call that a win.
Yeah.
And I just don't. This isn't a good team.
Yeah.
And Baker's not going to make them better. But, I mean, look what Baker did with Cleveland. He made them at least a little bit better. So if he can stay healthy, maybe not playoff level better, but he could be fun to watch.
Yeah.
And I think that him being named the starter, it makes sense. You traded for him this offseason. You already saw what Darnold did last year.
Yeah, Darnold. you know he's not the answer.
Right. And yeah, it's the same thing that we just said about him. He's not terrible, but he's not. I would say Baker is still on a higher level.
Definitely.
Considering that he led the Browns to the playoffs.
Yeah.
And is just a more athletic, better quarterback. So I think that it makes sense that he's ruled a starter. But I wouldn't be shocked either that if Baker struggles, that Darnold gets some reps.
Yeah.
I would not be shocked to see Darnold attempt somewhere between 75 to 100 passes.
Yeah, I agree. And like when Baker was in Cleveland too, he would run himself into sacks a lot.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like what you were saying, their O-line is pretty good actually. You know, Cleveland had a pretty good O-line. They dealt with some injuries, but for the most part, they had a decent O-line. And Baker just ran himself into a ton of sacks, which is just a recipe for disaster going to a team like Carolina where the O-line is so porous and you have terrible pocket awareness. Like, that's just a recipe for an injury, in my opinion. Like, he's going to get clocked.
Yeah.
And it won't go well. So, yeah, I definitely see Darnold getting reps. And then I think at the end of the season, they're going to be competing for the number 1 overall pick. And I think that they're going to throw in Matt Corral because I think that they want to see what he has, you know, because to gauge them for that pick for next year, if they want to use that on Bryce Young or CJ Stroud, or they can, if they have something with Matt Corral, they can use that on an O-lineman, a top O-lineman in the draft. You know what I'm saying? So I think that you're also going to see Matt Corral get a good amount of snaps. Definitely not in the beginning, though.
I think he's a real loser of the situation because he's not getting much help from the other guys.
Yeah, I know.
Right.
Like all these QBs like Love and stuff, and Trey Lance, not a great QB, Jimmy G, but Shanahan is a great offensive mind, you know. So all these young QBs have like these good mentors.
Well, and here's the other thing about Garoppolo. He got to play with Brady.
Yeah.
So at least he has that knowledge of being a good quarterback.
Yeah,
situation.
a Brady disciple.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, he is a good quarterback too.
Yeah.
If I'm being like,
he's not. I wouldn't say he's good. Like, yeah, he'll win you games. He's not. Here's my thought on Jimmy Garoppolo. He is not the guy that you're gonna have on the last series. Gun to your head. Is this the quarterback you want to win?
No, that's
games?
Rodgers.
No, yeah, but. I mean, I would go Brady, but that's just me. But my point is with Garoppolo, he will not win you games. He also won't lose your games.
Yeah,
he's going to do you enough that he's going to do enough in a game that if you have a good defense, good offensive players around him, he's going to put you in a position that you're going to feel. I mean, look what happened throughout the playoffs. He did enough that the 49ers were able to beat the Packers on special teams and defense. Mm-hmm. He did enough in the NFC Championship to put the 49ers in an interception drop away from going to the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And he got the 49ers to the Super Bowl by throwing 7 passes. He didn't throw an interception on any of those passes, though.
Yeah.
So he did enough to get you in these games, and the 49ers didn't even get blown out by the Chiefs.
Yeah, right, yeah.
So, I mean, I think that you're going to learn, like Trey Lance, I feel comfortable that he's going to learn from a serviceable quarterback. I just don't know if Baker and Darnold's certainly not. He just doesn't have the skill for it, I don't believe. And Baker doesn't seem like the type of guy that's going to be willing to teach someone.
Agreed, yeah.
And that's not really anything against Baker, it's just not his personality.
Yeah. And I don't think he even
and it's not and that's the other thing too. I don't think it's an NFL quarterback's job to teach the replacement. I think there's way too much emphasis on that. And it's just not really needed.
Yeah, a good point. Like with Rodgers, a big reason why people have said that there's like turmoil in the QB room is because like Rodgers isn't like reaching out necessarily the way the Packers want him to with Jordan Love. And it's like Rodgers is sitting there, you spent a first round pick on this guy instead of a receiver for me or an offensive lineman or anything.
Anything that would actually help me.
Yeah, he's sitting there pissed off because he has like Rodgers is not slowing down.
Right.
Rodgers you're looking at 5-6 years with him left.
Yeah, I feel like it's not really being talked about how Rodgers could potentially play to age 45 the same way
Brady has. Yeah, 100%. If Brady could do it, I think Rodgers is way more athletic than Brady, you know, in terms of his body and his ability.
And he has the reason Drew Brees couldn't do it is because he was a smaller quarterback. He had to rely a lot more on his arm. Mm-hmm. and try to rely on a lot of those smaller routes. But, I mean, he got beat up a lot early in his career as well. People forget that he was out for a season with that shoulder injury when he was with the Chargers back in 04, 03, something like that. Yeah. So those injuries come back, though. Mm-hmm. Rodgers' main injury was the broken collarbone. Same with Brady with his knee. Those injuries heal. Yeah. That's not taking a hard hit to the shoulder or something like that will slow you down. Yeah, so I 100% agree.
Yeah.
While we're on the topic of Rodgers, he's been airing out his frustrations with the receivers lately and then saying they've been improving, but basically he's been like an open book about his receivers all off season. Do you agree with this approach? Like, do you think it's going to be helpful to their growth?
I think that I do agree with it. I think it will be helpful because I think that sometimes that these guys need that push from the guy, because Rodgers he's not saying, oh, you need to be Davante Adams or something. If you listen to his quotes, he said that the guys need to know where they're supposed to be, run the routes that they're supposed to be running, and they need to catch the ball when it's thrown to them, or they're going to be behind the guy who's next up. You know, like that's what he said. Shit. Yeah, and it's like, that's not asking much. That's not being too harsh on someone. Like, you're asking for the bare minimum. And he's saying, if you do this, I'm going to pass you the ball and we're going to succeed. If you run your routes, if you are where you're supposed to be, if we're on the same page and you catch the ball when it's thrown to you, these are things that bad wide receivers fail at and good wide receivers are great at. You know what I'm saying? It's the basics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like, to me, when I heard that this was happening, this felt like more misguided anger at the front office of the Packers, and he was just letting all that anger out on the wide receivers. Mm-hmm. I think he's, first of all, angry, like we just talked about, that the front office did not draft anyone that could actually help Rodgers receiving wise, running back, offense, anyone on the offense in that first round multiple times that he's asked for it. The fact that Adams ended up leaving, which it's not directly the Packers front office fault, but it kind of is, because he never put that wide receiver 2 around the Packers to make them a step up in the NFC from just a really, really good regular season team and a team that will make it to the NFC Championship but not get past that level to being an actual Super Bowl contender. Yeah. And I think Rodgers now, he's like, okay, I'm nearing the end of my career. If it's not going to happen now, it might not happen ever. I just made a commitment to you guys. And these are the wide receivers that you give me? Like, I'm going to be frustrated at the wide receivers, but I'm also frustrated at the front office too. And that anger's got to go somewhere. And he's already aired out his anger at the front office, but now he's going to be 10 times harder, if not 100 times harder, on the wide receivers he has, because he's realizing these are the guys that will help him get to the Super Bowl. And they're just not
good enough.
They're not. And I mean, it's not like, obviously they're in the NFL. You have to be a very, very good wide receiver to get to the NFL.
Yeah.
But they're not superstars yet. Yeah. It's not like you're expecting any of these guys to put up Davante Adams numbers.
Yeah.
And I think that is a huge problem for Rodgers. It's going to be a huge problem for the Packers going into the season.
Yeah, I completely agree.
To add on to that point, I think you actually touched on a really great point where you said, like, they're a great regular season team and just having Davante made them predictable almost. And I was in 100% agreement, especially when I saw that divisional playoff game last year. They knew exactly who to stop, and it was a great defense. Yeah. And they were only able to hold him like 10 points. And I think now with Rodgers having a bunch of okay to decent receivers will make him way more unpredictable. And I think he's going to win a third consecutive MVP because he's already more valuable to the Packers than he was the last 2 years. And if the receivers just do what they're supposed to do, they're going to have the same, if not better, success in the postseason, because you got to worry about all sides of the field, not just wherever Davante is.
Yeah.
And Ryan Clark did a podcast with Davante Adams.
Yes.
And he was talking about like how much of a great leader Rodgers is. He even compared him to Michael Jordan in some cases. And I know you're laughing, but he's a great leader. A great, great, great leader. And
I'd take off a few of those grades, but
he makes everyone around him better. Everyone.
Not 6 titles better.
Mm-hmm. Not even 2 titles better.
No, okay. Do you guys really do you really want to do this right now?
Well,
I think you do. I think you're trying to do this.
Rodgers I'm not going to deny the fact that Rodgers is obviously the main talking head for the Packers. However, he has not led them to another Super Bowl. He obviously, as much as he's railed against the front office of the Packers, he has not worked closely enough with the front office to find someone that will help him. He pretty much directly got Mike McCarthy fired. And I get that there was a lot of other things that happened with Mike McCarthy, and you could argue that maybe he wasn't as great a coach as everyone thought he was. But Rodgers and McCarthy got to the Super Bowl together. So whatever happened in that relationship, Rodgers had something to do with it.
Mm.
So, and look, Jordan had problems with a lot of people. He had problems with a lot of coaches. Him and Phil Jackson were not best friends all of the time.
Yep.
But he never got Phil fired. And yeah, you could say because, Phil was a great coach, obviously the Bulls won't fire him. The Bulls still fired him after they won 6 championships.
Yeah.
Like, they still decided to replace him after a certain amount of time.
Yep.
And he won more than McCarthy did. So my point is that if you are the Packers, if you are Aaron Rodgers, you have to realize at a certain point, hey, I need to communicate a little bit better and maybe just not air all my anger out and actually talk with these guys and figure out. And that's how he got his contract figured out. He actually sat down and talked with the Packers front office.
Yeah.
I feel like he didn't do that with every single situation that he was dealt, and that was part of his problem.
Yeah.
Okay, did Rodgers have Belichick his whole career? No, right? He had Mike McCarthy, and you guys are almost defending Mike McCarthy.
No.
And he's been coaching probably around the time that we have been alive. And I can manage a clock better in Madden than he can in real life.
No, I agree, but here's the thing. You say this, but they were always still a top team in the NFC conference pretty much every single time that he choked in the playoffs. Like he
didn't choke last year.
No,
Let's get that out of the way.
Are you kidding me?
10 points.
That's a great defense, and they know exactly who to guard.
Okay, if it was such a great defense, then why did the Rams make it to the Super Bowl?
He got
And
pressured.
why were one of they the
whole
top 5
game.
offenses the whole game?
He was out Bakhtiari, and he was pressured the whole game, and the special teams cost him 10 points. 10 points.
Which is all he could put up. That's all he could muster? 10? Like, we're talking 10 points.
And they were still in the game.
He couldn't get
special teams.
He
They were
couldn't
still
get-
in the game.
All he needed was one more touchdown, right? One more touchdown. They lost 13-10. He needed one He couldn't get one touchdown? You're Aaron Rodgers.
The punter couldn't get a
No. You're Aaron Rodgers. It's back-to-back MVP. You couldn't get 2 touchdowns? 2. We're talking about 2 touchdowns. He couldn't get 2 touchdowns?
With a depleted line.
I'm sorry. Like,
defense.
that's unhit. Like, no, there are definitely more factors, but he is one of them, dude.
He
He's
didn't
one of them.
choke that year. He didn't choke.
Here's my defense.
Yes, he
for Mike.
did.
Wait. Here's my defense for Mike McCarthy. How many Super Bowl wins does Aaron Rodgers have?
1.
How many does Mike McCarthy have?
He shouldn't have won, but he has 1.
He has 1.
Why did they
He does
won?
have
Because
one.
they were a pair together. Rodgers has not won since McCarthy got fired. In fact, he's not been as close as he was when McCarthy was his coach.
Okay, you giving them credit for the same ring is like Kwame Brown saying that him and Kobe scored 82 points combined.
That's just, like
No. And here's why. Because that Packers defense that McCarthy was able to run was one of the best defenses of all time. And the next year, the Packers went 15-1. And that was not solely with Aaron Rodgers, because Aaron Rodgers was not an MVP caliber quarterback the way he is now early in his career like that.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, but
That team went 10-6, made a run through the playoffs with Rodgers basically doing nothing in Chicago. Yeah, he played well against Atlanta, but he did nothing. The game was 21-14. The Packers shut down the Bears offense.
Yeah.
That Bears offense was good.
yeah.
That was not a bad Bears offense.
Uh-huh.
And that was Mike McCarthy being a good coach. Yes, he is not Belichick level. I am not saying that. I'm just saying that people are way more willing to hate Mike McCarthy and give Aaron Rodgers a pass when McCarthy is actually not fully the problem. That's my point.
And here's the other thing. I just want to jump in real quick, too. Aaron Rodgers has consistently been the best quarterback in the NFC since 2010, 2011. The difference between Rodgers and Brady is that Brady runs through his conference every single year. No matter what QB he faces, he owned him. He beat Manning plenty of times. He beat Roethlisberger plenty of times. Those are the QBs that he was going up against that were on his level in the conference. Rodgers, he's been through many QBs that have just they've beaten him. Matt Ryan, Jimmy Garoppolo, Eli Manning. These are QBs who are nowhere close to his talent level, but their teams surpass his team. That says something to me. And you're right. You're right on the aspect that Rodgers was not the only thing wrong with the Packers. And there were games that the Packers lost, that Rodgers played well in, and, the defense let him down. I don't agree that the special teams let him down. I mean, if you are trying to blame a loss on the special teams in the playoffs, that's...
Well, can you name another game with
it's very important. Special teams is very important, but...
You're saying it shouldn't have come down to the special teams.
Right, you're going to let the game come down to special teams?
If you're the Packers, you know that special teams is a problem.
Yeah.
It was very well known that the punt team was 32nd in the league, dead last. You know they were bad. So if you're Aaron Rodgers, you have to know that you cannot rely on your special teams to win you this game.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you should be able to rely on them not to allow 10 points.
Jack, if you're going into the playoffs knowing that you're 32nd in special teams on your team, you have to know that you can't rely on them to win a playoff game, and that's up to you.
And here's the other thing. Bro, you are talking about one play. They let up a blocked punt and...
missed a field goal.
Yeah. You are talking about...
They could have scored on that. They could have scored on that series that they missed the field goal.
Yeah.
They could have scored a touchdown.
Yeah. And, you were talking about 2 plays in an entire football game. Think about how many plays Aaron Rodgers impacted that he didn't succeed on. Completely outweighs what the special teams did.
Also, if we're going to argue about coaches with bad play, bad clock management.
Yeah.
Who did the Packers lose to in the 2012 NFC Championship?
And before you answer that,
2013, by the way, my bad. 2013 NFC Championship. Who did the Packers lose to?
Tell me, I didn't watch
Seahawks. Who is the Seahawks coach? Pete Carroll. Mm-hmm. What is Pete Carroll known for? Not for winning that Super Bowl. It's for one of the worst decisions in Super Bowl history. Going for a 2nd and 1 when you have the best goal line running back of all time and deciding to pass it and it getting picked off. That is the coach that the Packers lost to. Yeah. So don't tell me that that clock management loses you game, because it does. But when you have 2 coaches that are equally level, do not know what they're doing when it comes down to winning, and the Seahawks still win that game, don't even get me started.
And Rodgers threw multiple interceptions that game.
Here's what I will say, though. Brady had a cakewalk of scenarios his whole career.
Please.
And Rodgers did not. That's what I'm saying.
I completely
I'm sorry. So beating Peyton Manning 3 times to get the Super Bowl is a cakewalk?
Marvin Harrison,
no,
Reggie
but he
Wayne.
had the great teams his whole entire career.
And
he had 2 of the best tight ends ever on his team. And he had Belichick. And he had great defenses. Every time.
But Jack, Rob Gronkowski wasn't some highly touted tight end prospect. He was a mid-round pick. And who do you think made him Rob Gronkowski? Besides Belichick, because Belichick did play a role, but the main reason, Darth Vader himself, Tom Brady. He's the Jack. Tom Brady.
The same exact thing with Devontae, though.
What are you talking about?
With Rodgers, Devontae.
Devontae Adams was a 2nd-round pick.
So wait.
He was a highly touted wide receiver prospect.
Not 1st round, though.
They were saying that he was going to be a 1st-round pick, and he got passed on. You're gonna argue that Brady had a cakewalk when he'd play Peyton Manning, when Peyton Manning had...
No, I'm not saying from
Reggie Wayne, and who was the other...
Marvin
Harrison and Reggie Wayne in the 2000s, and then when Peyton went to Denver and had Demaryius Thomas, Eric Decker, multiple wide receivers. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All of these other weapons that Brady was able to beat with a bunch of 6th-round scrubs, converted QBs to wide receiver.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Rodgers can't do that now with a bunch of guys who are actual wide receivers.
Yep.
To be determined. This is his year.
We'll see. We'll see.
They are not going to win the Super Bowl.
No, I'm not thinking that. But
what's his year then?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Never. I don't think he's winning another one for his career if he stays with the Packers.
I mean, if it's going to be in Green Bay, I don't think they're winning another one.
In the next 2 years, that Tampa Bay job might be open.
I know, yeah.
Just throwing it out there.
Yeah, or the Miami job might be open very soon too.
We'll see. Miami's questionable right now, but
I think Tua is going to be good.
We'll see.
I think he's going to be good.
While we're talking about Tampa Bay, though, Aaron Rodgers Tom Brady returned to training camp.
Never put those 2 in the same sentence ever again.
Tom Brady did return to camp. We talked about this.
We speculated a lot.
Right.
About that.
So, as I said, he's 45 years old. Who knows what he was doing? Like we said, he's a very private guy. He's not going to let a whole lot out if something's going on. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a concern then. It's still not a concern now. He was never going to play in this third preseason game.
No.
He was never going to practice that much considering where he's at his age, his experience level, what his actual resume is in regular season playoff games.
Yep.
So, I mean, it's basically, to me, whatever. I'm glad that he's back.
Yeah.
I'm sure his teammates are happy he's back. I'm sure that he's happy to be back. And that's really all there is to this story.
Yeah, I think that he just was taking a mental break, probably. I think that's all it really was. And when a star QB like Brady leaves the team for 10 days, it's going to be a huge story. So I think that even before it happened, they knew that it was going to be big, you know.
When you weren't there, we were speculating that he was like getting cold feet because like 80% of the line just fell.
Yeah, but definitely not. I mean, Brady's Brady, and he wants to go win a championship. Like, if he's going to be on the Bucs, he's committed to winning a championship. That's just the bottom line.
So you guys had a couple marquee matchups for college football you want to talk about? I'm going to sit this one out. Stay in my own lane.
Yep. So this week is the official week. Week 0 of college football. They do an opening week before the real week 1 where they have some more marquee games. There is a couple that are pretty noteworthy though. The first one that I wrote down, Jack, you wrote this one down as well. Northwestern versus Nebraska. This game's going to be played in Ireland. I believe this is the first game since UCF and Penn State played.
No way, really?
I believe so.
Wow. Okay.
I don't remember another one since. I know Notre Dame played a couple times, but I believe that was the last one. Especially it was the first one to open college football.
Yeah.
And that was 2014, 2013, something like that.
Yeah, it was
2014, I believe, to start the 2014 season. But anyway, Northwestern last year, well, both teams struggled a lot. Both finished in the cellar of the Big Ten West. Both were 3-9, both 1-8 in conference play. What's interesting about this matchup to me, not really the players, it's more the coaches. The first coach I want to talk is Scott Frost. Obviously, everyone really knows him, what he did at UCF to go undefeated. The 1 year almost went undefeated the second year.
Yeah.
He's just a really well-known coach. He went to Nebraska, which is where he played college football. He's really struggled since then, so he's definitely on the hot seat right now.
Yeah.
Northwestern's coach, on the other hand, Pat Fitzgerald, the best Northwestern coach of all time, got the program to the Big Ten Conference Championship, which no Northwestern coach has done.
Unheard of.
Yeah. I mean, it's been forever since Northwestern even made it to the Rose Bowl. The fact that they made it that far was pretty noteworthy.
Yeah.
So his job is probably safe after that terrible season last year, but Northwestern will need to bounce back and have a much better season than that if he wants to feel comfortable with his job. The other interesting thing, too, in this game is that Adrian Martinez, who was Nebraska's quarterback last year, left for Kansas State.
Yep.
So they're going to have a new quarterback. They officially announced that it's going to be Casey Thompson, who was a transfer quarterback from Texas last year through 24 TDs for Texas. And Northwestern really hasn't announced who their quarterback's going to be. So it's going to be an interesting game from that perspective.
Yeah, and just looking at the game, I saw it was a 13-point spread for Nebraska. I'm really looking at Northwestern to cover that. I'm not a huge Nebraska guy. I thought when Scott Frost went to Nebraska, I thought he was going to turn the program around and take them back to their glory 90 days, you know. But obviously that hasn't happened, and I don't really see that happening anymore. I don't think Scott Frost is a good coach. I think that they're going to be looking to move on pretty soon. On the flip side, I think Pat Fitzgerald is a phenomenal head coach. I think he's one of the best coaches in the Big Ten.
Definitely the most underrated coach in college football.
Unquestionably the most underrated, because when you look in the Big Ten, it's like Ryan Day, obviously. I'm drawing a blank on Michigan State.
Yeah,
he just signed a huge contract, but
no, Michigan State.
Yeah,
Jim Harbaugh's at Michigan.
This is why I don't do college.
Yeah, I'm blanking on his name as well.
Yeah,
but I know
you know who I'm talking about. He just signed a big deal, and then obviously Harbaugh is Harbaugh. I don't think Harbaugh's a great coach, but
even
he did win.
As much hate as Franklin got, he still got Penn State up from all these sanctions to getting them to the bowl game, to getting them to the Rose Bowl, which was unthought of.
Yeah.
For 5 years to get from basically the bottom of college football to the Rose, he's had other issues as well. Yeah. But he consistently brings in the best recruiting classes and all that. But anyway, continue.
So I think Pat Fitzgerald is a top 5 QB. I think, or not QB, coach in the Big Ten. I think that he would probably knock out Franklin if it was between him and Franklin. Like, I think he would knock out Franklin. So, honestly, I think he would knock out Harbaugh, too, if it was between him and Harbaugh. I'm choosing Fitzgerald, in my opinion.
I am as well. The thing is about both Franklin and Harbaugh, not only do they play at bigger, more well-known college football programs, they're really good at recruiting.
Yeah, yeah.
And this is where what really hurts Northwestern is the fact that they are more an academically focused school than any other Big Ten school.
Yeah, you're right, yeah.
And the issue is that, especially in the Midwest, there's not a conference for private schools that are more focused on academics. In basketball, you got the Big East, which is more privately smaller. Like in college basketball, you get these smaller conferences that are easier to you to fit into. If you're an academically focused school, it's not really a thing in college football.
Yeah.
So that really hurts Northwestern from a recruiting standpoint, from a really
a competitive standpoint.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the fact that he got them to that level is just amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's one of my favorite coaches, definitely.
By far. And the players love him a lot. And even with Northwestern being 3-9 last year, they never really felt like that they were that far out of a lot of games. Yeah. Even though they were giving up a lot of yards, a lot of points, it never really felt like the program was like the same way that Nebraska was like 3-9, and it felt like they were way worse than that. Yeah. It felt like that Northwestern was a little bit better. And that's saying that even though Nebraska lost like the most 1-point games, or the closest games, the most amount of close games in NCAA football history, which is just insane.
Yeah, they gave Oklahoma a run for their money on Oklahoma's field. I was impressed, but at the same time, obviously the collapse happened, right after that. So
exactly. Yeah. The other game that I want to focus on, there's a few others, mostly FCS playing FBS and basically money games. Yeah. So FBS teams will invite smaller schools, mostly the smaller Division I schools. Basically, as guarantee wins, the smaller schools get $600,000 to get to travel, be on national TV. So basically, it's a win-win unless the bigger school loses. Yeah, right. That's a huge loss for them. But the one big game is at the latest game on this week 0 kickoff is Hawaii versus Vanderbilt. Most notable part of this game is that Timmy Chang's coming back for Hawaii. Yeah. He is probably one of the best quarterbacks in NCAA history when you look at what he did statistically. Yeah. He holds many NCAA records, including attempts. He held the record for yards until that was broken by Case Keenum in 2012. He held he's second in Hawaii history for touchdown passes at 117. He also holds the most famous record, which is most interceptions in a career. Yeah. Most pass attempts, he basically was just a great futuristic quarterback in a time when quarterbacks were not known to throw the ball. Hawaii is known as a very fast-paced, high-scoring offense. Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see how Chang runs the offense, considering that he was in a pass-first offense. Yeah. When he played, I would assume that's the offense he wants to run.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too.
It's also going to be interesting because this is a smaller school. Hawaii's in the Mountain West Conference versus a bigger school. Yes, Vanderbilt went 2-10 last year. Really struggled. Yeah. But they are still an SEC school.
In the toughest conference.
Right, exactly. And the same issue that Northwestern has, where you're a private school and mostly public school, public schools. Vanderbilt's a very private school, also very highly academically rated, but that doesn't usually translate to football.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I'm really interested in that game because I think that Hawaii, who they are the underdog, I believe 6.5 points. I think that they can win that game outright. I think that they're definitely going to cover that spread. First off, the game is in Hawaii, right? And like you were saying, I think it's going to be an air raid offense for Hawaii this year. And I'm kind of interested to see how it works because, like you said, when you have good coaching with that type of offense, it typically can work out really well. Exhibit A is Bruce Arians with the Tampa Bay Bucks. Even when Jameis Winston was the QB, the air raid offense did pretty well, considering they had Jameis Winston as their QB, who threw 30 interceptions. But he also threw 30 touchdowns, which I believe led the league that year. And then with Hawaii, I think that they can beat up on a team like Vanderbilt, who is coming into the season probably with with very little confidence.
Right.
Coming out of the SEC, which was, they had a horrendous season last year.
Yeah.
They got spanked by Georgia on their home field, which
Right.
obviously Georgia's really good, but you want to put up a fight on your home field against a team like that,
For sure, especially in conference like that.
Yeah.
It's just not good.
Yeah. So I think that Hawaii can win that game. I think that's going to be an entertaining game to watch at the very least,
Yeah. The other interesting thing is that this definitely is not a guarantee game. The fact that this game's in Hawaii.
Yeah.
The fact that Hawaii finished 6-7 last year. I forget exactly what happened, but basically they played a 13th game and lost their bowl eligibility.
Yeah.
But they were right on the edge of it, and for some reason they weren't invited to a bowl game, even though they finished 6-7. When most teams only play 12 games in their season, they played, like I said, they played 13. It didn't really make a whole lot of sense to me, but you have to be feeling pretty confident, right?
Mm-hmm,
Going 6-7 last year, thinking that now you have a shot at a bowl game. This year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So those two games definitely stick out to me.
Yeah.
I think Florida State also kicks off against Duquesne.
Yeah.
It's not a game that I really wrote down. It's just going to be interesting because Florida State has really dropped off as a program.
Mm-hmm.
And Duquesne, it's definitely a guaranteed game because Duquesne is not well known, but they have made the FCS playoffs a couple of times.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to see how that game goes.
Yeah, Florida State is a team that, they were so perennially amazing, and they have had a historic program. That's one of the blue bloods in college football. But yeah, recently, it's been a downhill slope for them since 2017, 2018, even when they had Dalvin Cook. They were ranked really high to start the year. But then I remember they played Bama in the opener and got annihilated. And that just dropped them to the 20s, and then they fell out, and it's been really tough for them to get their feet in.
Yeah.
And
and the other thing that's scary for Florida State fans is the fact that they play in the ACC, which is a good conference, but last year was definitely way weaker than it has been. So there was a huge opening, and the team that took it was Pitt. Which nobody Kenny Pickett is obviously a good quarterback. He was first overall. Pitt had a very, very good team, but you wouldn't expect Pittsburgh to win the ACC over teams like Clemson, Miami, Florida State.
And now you have Wake Forest who's being added into that. So it's going to be tough for Florida State. And especially when they have to recruit with some of these teams in their conference and stuff, it's going to be tough for them. And then it's hard for them to pull Florida recruits when you have to deal with the Gators. To be honest. Because the Gators, even though they aren't necessarily where they were in the past either, but they're definitely better than Florida State.
There's definitely one of those states that there's 3 big schools all relatively close. Gainesville and Tallahassee are the closest two. So you're fighting a recruiting battle there. But the whole southern part of Miami southern part of Florida should go to Miami.
And that's that's a breeding ground for talent there. That whole southern tip of the peninsula is crazy for talent. That's where Lamar's from. And, you could run through 20.
All of the Miami guys from the 80s are basically from there.
You want to run through our conferences too? We can do our conference predictions.
Yeah, sounds good.
I'll start.
Penn State winning the championship.
Hell no. They are not getting close to the Big Ten championship. I guess we'll start with the Big Ten.
Sounds good.
So I guess this is a sleeper pick for me because there are some that I've picked that are just the obvious choice, but I wanted to pick some that were definitely dark horses. The Big Ten favorite this year is definitely going to be Ohio State.
For sure.
They're bringing back C.J. Stroud, and they're bringing back a lot of guys on defense. They're incredibly coached. Ryan Day has proven to be a great successor to Urban Meyer. But this year I'm going to take Michigan State. I think Michigan State is going to win the Big Ten. They're bringing back, I think, 5 or 6 seniors on their defense, and they're bringing back their QB. They're bringing back 3 upperclassmen receivers. I think they're going to have a good year. Even though they lost Kenneth Walker, I think their run game won't lose a beat because they're returning 4 senior offensive linemen.
Which is huge.
Yeah, and they're starting a transfer at the right guard position. And the head coach, who I was drawing a blank on, I looked it up, Mel Tucker. Mel Tucker is one of the best coaches in college football.
By far.
So I think that Michigan State's going to they're going to break through the way Michigan did last year, because Michigan State has been close a couple times, and then they fell off a little bit 2019, 2020, 2021. Or no, I'm sorry, 2021 they had the bounce back, which was obviously last year. They bounced back into where they normally have been, which is top 15 team in the country. So I think Michigan State's going to break through this year. What do you think about the Big Ten?
I'm going to go with a couple. I think Michigan State's definitely up there. I feel like Michigan, yes, they made it to college football playoff. Yes, they won the big. I'm thinking they're going to take a step back.
That's what I'm thinking. Too,
just because the loss of Aiden Hutchinson on defense is huge.
Yeah.
I don't think that they're going to beat Ohio State. Now that you beat them once with Harbaugh, I think that you now have that added need to beat Michigan in this game, especially for O'Day being a relatively newer coach to this rivalry.
Right.
Where Urban Meyer never lost to Jim Harbaugh and never lost to Michigan either his entire time in Ohio State.
Yeah.
So now there's that added pressure. The other team that I'm interested in, I want to hear your thoughts on this. Purdue possibly winning just because the Big Ten West is so weak.
Yeah, that honestly,
then they were ranked a couple times. They had some huge upsets. They got blown out by Ohio State.
Yeah.
But like I said, they did have some big upsets in the West. They beat Iowa. I believe it was Iowa they beat.
Yeah, Purdue on the road. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So, and they finished 9-4, beat Tennessee in the Music City Bowl. I could see them, again, sort of like the way Northwestern made it to the Big Ten Championship, just running through a weak West.
Yeah.
But they actually have enough players to possibly win that.
Yeah, the championship game.
I think they're in are they in the West?
Yeah, they are.
They are,
100%.
So,
I could definitely see that. Like, you're 100% right. I feel like the Big Ten West always has a new team sneak through, like, i.e. Northwestern that one year. You know, because it usually bounces off of Wisconsin and Iowa mainly, but yeah, you're right that sometimes a team can break through. And honestly, I think Purdue they definitely could break through the Big Ten West. And if they do, if you're right about that, I think that they could stay there, you know, and compete with Wisconsin and Iowa for the top of the Big Ten West, like, for years to come.
For sure.
I mean, as long as...
and the other thing, like, teams like, obviously you've got Wisconsin, Minnesota, who are always up there. But it just feels like that this is Purdue's best chance in a very long time, and I think they're going to take it.
And Wisconsin's QB, I think they're returning Graham Mertz.
Okay.
He's not good.
Yeah.
He's horrible.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, Aiden O'Connell for Purdue, 28 touchdowns, 11 interceptions.
He's good. He's pretty good.
That's nearly 4,000 yards, and he's like a 6-year quarterback, so he's got, because of COVID, because of him being a redshirt, so he's got more experience than most quarterbacks. In the Big Ten, so it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, I'm ready to see him. And then we should get into the SEC, obviously now the granddaddy of all college football.
Yeah.
I think that this year it's very, very clear that Alabama is running with the conference this year. I think they're going to compete with Georgia. I think Florida could give Georgia a run for the money in the West.
In the East.
Or in the East, I'm sorry. But yeah, Alabama's going to run through the West, definitely. Yeah. I think Arkansas will be up there, but
I just want to put this out there. So you don't think that Texas A&M with their 8 5-star recruits can beat Bama right now?
Here's the thing. Texas A&M looks really good, and they will be a really good team.
Yeah.
They're going to finish in the top 10, but they messed with the bowl.
Yeah.
That was not a good move by Jimbo Fisher, I don't think, getting into that beef, I'll call it, with Nick Saban.
Right.
I think that...
illegal recruiting.
Yeah, I think that's a huge mess, and I think, obviously, for Bama and A&M, the winner of the SEC West is pretty much going to come down to that regular season matchup, you know, because... if Bama wins that, you don't see them losing another game in the SEC.
The only one that, again, they could lose just because of the rivalry is the Iron Bowl.
Yeah.
How close it was last year, considering Auburn was not a good team. Mm-hmm. And that's always your main concern to me when it comes to college football, is these rivalry weekends. Yeah. Because it doesn't matter what the other team's record is. If you know you have a chance to beat your arch rival, especially if it's... And the difference between the Iron Bowl between most other rivalries, it's in conference... and it's in-state.
Yeah.
And that's something not even Ohio State and Michigan can say, is that it's in-state.
Yep.
So that's a whole other added thing to the Iron Bowl that makes it so exciting to watch.
Yeah, it's like the Duke-UNC of college football, because Duke-UNC, no matter what the two teams are, the game's going to be close.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
So I think that's my only main concern, is that the Iron Bowl was really close last year. Mm-hmm. If Auburn feels like that they've and obviously, I think Bama's even better this year than they were last year. Yeah. But I feel like that if they could be upset by either Auburn or lose to Texas A&M. Yeah. If they get through those two teams, I don't see them. You brought up Arkansas. Yeah. Maybe. But, I mean, the rest of the West is just pretty weak. Yeah, LSU is falling off a cliff. Yeah. since they won the title.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I just don't see, and like you said, I just don't see Georgia.
Yeah,
being
and
as good as they were
looking
last
at Bama's schedule, they actually do have some pretty tough games. They have to go to Texas week 2,
Right.
which Texas isn't ranked, but that's obviously a tough game going there. They have to go to Arkansas.
Okay.
They have the Texas A&M game is home for them, which it makes it
That's an
added
bonus for them.
Sure. They have to go to Tennessee, which Tennessee's, again, not that good, but the environment.
They've upset them in the past, too, though. And
that
they're one of those
good.
weird teams that's never great. They're never terrible.
Yeah,
either.
and
they're always just
there's always like
around.
the hype with them. There's always that preseason hype with them. And sometimes they don't live up to it.
It's like the hype that goes to Texas, but it's less annoying.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's less. I like Tennessee.
Yeah, I do
root
too.
for them. So they have to go to LSU, which LSU's not really great. They
Who
have
do
a head
they have to
coaching
play in the
change.
East? Just curious.
They have to play Tennessee, Vanderbilt, which and they play Vanderbilt at home.
Okay.
And then
so
that's
not
the
really
only
any
one.
of the no Kentucky.
Nope.
No Georgia, no Florida. That's nice for them
that's
because
huge.
Kentucky's improved their football team a lot.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Like,
Kentucky's a good program now.
Yeah, I could see them and I like Stetson Bennett as a quarterback.
Yeah.
But I feel like if you can figure him out, and the fact that Georgia's lost a lot of defensive pieces, I could see either Kentucky or Florida, if they build up a good enough program in the offseason to make a decent run. It just depends how consistent you are. Obviously, there's a lot of other variables that go into that.
Yeah.
And the fact that Georgia is just very well coached compared to everyone else, so they can make it farther even with less talented players.
Yeah.
But yeah, that will be interesting. But I definitely think Bama's going to win the SEC.
We'll do one more conference. We'll go to the Pac-12 because I think we should get into USC if we're going to talk about
for sure.
Just obviously with the drama and everything that happened this offseason.
Yep.
I still think that USC is going to be really good this year. Lincoln Riley's just one of those coaches that will bring a good program with him wherever he goes. I mean, he really established himself at Oklahoma. He was a monster in recruiting at Oklahoma, if you remember that. I think that he's just going to carry that over to USC. Obviously, he's bringing Caleb Williams, but he also flipped recruits from Oklahoma to USC, which is huge.
I feel so bad for Oklahoma.
Yeah, I do. But I think they'll be okay.
They'll be okay, but I just feel so bad if you're a new coach going into that program and you thought you were getting all these recruits and then they all leave. So now you're left with a depleted roster, with a fan base that's angry at everyone everything that just happened, and now you're still expected to win. That's just a terrible situation to be in. But going back to USC, I totally agree. I think they'll definitely be more improved.
Yeah. And
for sure.
I think the Pac-12 was really weak, too. I think that Oregon might be able to put up a fight, but losing Cristobal to Miami is a huge loss for them. So I don't think that they'll be as good as they were last year, which wasn't even that good.
Yeah.
So, I think USC is going to run with the Pac-12, and then we'll just touch on real quick. I have Baylor winning the Big 12. I think that they're going to
I'm going to go either Baylor, maybe Texas if they actually live up to it this time. Mm-hmm. But again, it's just a weaker conference. I mean, now with the transfer of Martinez to Kansas State, Martinez obviously struggled at Nebraska, but the Big 12 is going to be a little bit weaker.
And the talent is there for him.
Right, exactly. So I think that Kansas State could also... I feel like the Big 12 right now is the most open conference to win.
I can agree with that. Yeah.
I could see at 3 or 4 different teams making that. Honestly, 5 if you include Iowa State, which always is pretty good.
Yeah.
My biggest concern with them when it comes to not necessarily winning the conference, but college football playoff time, they're all so even. Could end up like a Pac-12 situation where they all beat up on each other. Yeah. And it's exciting to be in the conference because you don't know who's going to win, but you automatically know after week 5 that none of these teams are making the college playoff, which could be a disappointment for people in that fans of that conference.
And then also quickly, I'd have Miami upsetting Clemson in the ACC.
Interesting.
Yeah. I think that I like Cristobal.
So no Pitt, you don't think?
Nah, I don't think so. I don't think Pitt is going to carry on with that. Because that, if you remember, UNC had a pretty good shot at the ACC championship. I think it was 2016. And then they fell off. And then Clemson had a couple more teams like that who came out of the ACC. I forget what they call that division. I think it's the Coastal or whatever it is. I forget. Obviously, it's Clemson on one side. And then it's you got a couple decent teams. You have Wake, who obviously was in it. You have UNC and Duke. And then you have Trash, which is pretty much like Boston College and Syracuse. So I think that Miami could make some noise in this conference, especially that Clemson has come down a leg. You know what I'm saying? Because last year they had they definitely had a downturn from last year. They were unranked for a good stretch of the season.
Yeah.
They snuck back into the rankings at the end. So I think that it's kind of open. Again, that's another conference like the Big 12 that's a little bit open.
That's the other reason, because of the Big 12 and the ACC losing a lot of talent. That's why I could kind of see, again, what happened last year were two SEC teams sneaking in.
Yeah.
I feel like that could happen again this year.
Yeah.
If, let's say, Georgia, Texas A&M, whichever team is able to get away with like one loss, I think you could still make it in, even if you don't make it to the conference championship or win the conference championship.
Yeah, agreed.
I had myself a nice little nap. All right, I got 3 rapid fire takes. Bryce Harper started his rehab stint, and in his first game he had 2 home runs. And when I last checked his second game, which took place today, he was 2 for 2.
Really?
I don't know what he finished, but he had a double and a single.
Okay, yeah.
So he's just a triple away from the cycle in his last 2 games.
I mean, you can't even say enough about the guy. I mean, he's an incredible player.
I'm just happy that, like, obviously he's facing lesser talent than you would in the major leagues. I'm just happy to see that he hasn't lost anything off his swing.
Yeah, 100%.
Because the thing is, when you have a finger injury like that with like a broken finger, broken hand, whatever it was, you have to be concerned whether or not you can still hold the bat properly.
Yeah.
Sometimes guys will take it with their swings when something happens like that, or they're afraid because they just got hit by a ball that broke their finger.
Right.
But it looks like that there's no fear in him. It looks like his swing's perfectly fine. So all good news for Phillies fans.
Yeah, and actually
they're a lock for the playoffs, though.
The reason I say yes is because I still think the Padres could get it together. They haven't yet. I still hold a little bit of faith. It's dwindling.
Yeah.
But it's there. The Brewers trading Josh Hader and not doing anything else, they basically traded out of
the
playoffs to
Agreed.
me. Where the Phillies added Syndergaard and they added a couple other
Robertson in the bullpen.
Yeah,
too.
Robertson, Marsh. So they actually added a few more guys that made them a deeper team.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's the reason that they get in.
Yeah.
It might be as the 6th, it might be as the 5th. I'm not 100% sure yet. It really depends on if the Padres wake up.
Yeah.
But I do think they get in.
The word lock is too big of a word for me, especially with the Phillies. I don't want to say
it's not September yet. That's all I'm going to say.
It's not September. It's not September yet.
It's funny you brought up Syndergaard, though, because it's just so funny to me. He has an undefeated record here, and he just should not.
Yeah, no, he really shouldn't.
Here's the
Especially that first game.
Yeah. What I will say about Syndergaard, he gives up a lot of hits. Yeah, he's had too many base runners on. He's only allowed 1 home run.
Yeah.
He doesn't allow a lot of hard hits, which for playing in Citizens Bank Park is actually a big plus.
Yeah.
That he doesn't throw as fast as he used to because the balls just aren't traveling as far.
Yeah.
So I think that's the thing that's helping him a lot is that he's keeping the ball in the stadium.
Yeah.
If he can learn to just keep it on the infield, it's going to help a lot more.
Yeah.
Be a lot less stressful.
Yeah. That's like what Cole Hamels.
Right.
Back in 2008, he was one of those guys, like, his changeup was so good. You were either going to swing or miss or just punch it in the dirt.
Right.
Yeah.
So or you got to learn to do some more defensive shifts, maybe playing guys a little bit farther back on the infield when he's pitching with no runners on, maybe bring the outfielders a little bit more in.
Yeah.
I think that it is a little bit, obviously his whip is too high.
Yeah.
But I think that there's a lot more to look into his pitching rather than just seeing his whip and watching how many runners get on.
All right. So Albert Pujols is at a race for the all-time home run spot. How many home runs do you think he'll finish with career?
I think he'll surpass 700. I think he's going to hit the marker. I forget what he's at.
He's at 693.
693
now. Okay.
Yeah, he's going to get 700. I think he'll be close to 720 around there because I think he's going to come back next year.
You do think he's going to come back?
Yeah, I think he's going to come back.
He said he was going to retire, but you think he still has a little bit more left in him?
I think that he does. Especially with this August. He's hitting like 400 in August. I think that he's got more left, and I think that part of the Cardinals will convince him, like, yo, we could make a run. Like, you could help us.
Right.
Like, he could seriously be a part of a World Series team right now. Like,
Oh, yeah.
You know?
No, for sure. Especially, and it's crazy that that the Angels struggled so much when he played with them. They only made it to one playoff series, didn't win a game. And now he went back to St. Louis. Last time he played with them, they made the World Series.
Yeah.
He's back, and they're looking like a World Series team. I think that there's 2 things that stick out to my mind. So, I don't know if he gets to 700 this year. I think that if he gets He's going to hit around 698, 699. That's what I think.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the pace that he's on now, he just hasn't been hitting as many home runs.
Yeah.
Up until the last, 3 weeks.
Yeah.
I think eventually he's going to cool off and pitchers will learn a little bit more, maybe not to pitch to him.
Yeah.
As the season gets later, they might start resting him.
Yeah.
But I think that if he doesn't get to 700, he comes back next season.
698 was my guess. So.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking. I'm thinking he'll come back for 700. The only question I have is if he doesn't get to 700 by the end of the season, does he come back? Does he just try to get to 700 and then retire? Or does he keep playing the rest of next season? Because he did say when he retire this season. I think if he gets to 700 this year, he won't come back. I think that would be.
See that.
Yeah, I think that, and especially if they win the World Series and he gets to 700, he definitely won't come back.
Yeah.
Because he would achieve everything that he would
right.
want. As
if
a
he
player.
wins the world, I think honestly, even if he doesn't get to 700, but they win the World Series, he wouldn't come back.
Yeah, because I think also if they win the World Series, I don't see Molina coming back.
Yeah.
And Wainwright, as dominant as he's been.
Yeah, he's one of those
Just
guys.
because he's around that age and would win another World Series, I wouldn't. I would be disappointed. I would be a little bit surprised just because he looks like one of those guys that could pitch into his mid-40s.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
But again, it wouldn't shock me just with the age, the fact that there's two other superstars that were Cardinals franchise players around him that are also retiring, that he wouldn't want to retire, especially if Molina retires, that Wainwright would stick around without his battering mate.
Yeah, agreed.
And lastly, Udonis Haslem is returning to the Heat for the 20th season.
He's returning?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Is he going to play at all?
No.
He
It'll
played,
be like
one game last year?
Yeah.
And
Something
he got
that.
one technical?
Yeah. And was thrown out. I like this move not from the standpoint that he's actually going to play at all, but the fact that you have a guy that's been in the locker room for 20 years.
Yeah.
I think that's a really added thing that a lot of teams don't get. Obviously, the Lakers had Kobe for around 20 years. Mavericks had Dirk for close to 20 years.
Yeah.
So it really just helps with that locker room experience, especially because the Heat have a lot of newer guys, relatively new. Jimmy Butler's in his third year now with the Heat. But you have a lot of and Jimmy Butler's a good leader, but you want one of those guys that also knows the team inside and out, that won a championship with that team, that knows how to get there. Because as great as Jimmy is, he's never made it to a championship.
Yeah, right.
So now you have someone else that can really add in. So I like this move from that standpoint.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Definitely.
But don't you think, there's some people that just think he should get, an organizational job with the team? Do you have any thoughts with that?
That's he could definitely do that, but it's does Haslam want to do that? Because I think Haslam has made his money, and I think he just wants to retire, and live his life.
I think it's also, he could do that. I also think the Heat seem to understand that having him as a player is more helpful.
Yeah. Because
sometimes you stick these guys in the front office and the players never see them. Or you stick them in a different role, the players just don't connect with them. When at least when it's a player to player, he might be 20 years older than the newest rookie.
Yeah.
But he's still a player. He still knows the NBA. Yeah. And I feel like that can be more beneficial than if you stick him in a coaching job. Because you can see, what we talked about earlier with the Nets, you have Steve Nash, who was a player, who is now coaching. You can't connect with his players.
Yeah, right.
And because it's a different mindset when you're just a player helping other players than when you're a coach helping players.
Yeah, I can. That's definitely true.
So I think him still being a player helps a lot with the Heat.
All right, I think I'll do it for this episode, but I just came up with something on the fly. Me and Jack are in a fantasy league. So on Instagram, we're just going to screenshot our lineups and you guys are going to vote who is the better team. We talked about this last episode, but send us your fantasy lineups and we'll critique them and we'll give someone $10 for the team we like best.
Yeah, okay.
All right, peace.